The Boston Tea Party, a turning point in American history. On a cold December night in 1773, a group of colonists forever changed the course of American history. Disguised as Mohawk Indians, they boarded 3 ships in Boston Harbor and dumped 342 chests of tea into the water. This act of defiance, known as the Boston Tea Party, became a pivotal moment in the lead-up to the American Revolution. But what led to this dramatic event, and what were its consequences? To understand the Boston Tea Party, we must first examine the political climate of 18th-century colonial America. In the aftermath of the 7 Years' War, 1756 to 1763, Britain found itself saddled with enormous debt. To alleviate this financial burden, the British Parliament began imposing a series of taxes on the American colonies. The Sugar Act of 1764 and the Stamp Act of 1765 were among the first measures that sparked colonial discontent. These acts imposed taxes on various goods and documents, igniting protests throughout the colonies. The rallying cry, "No taxation without representation," emerged, encapsulating the colonists' frustration at being taxed by a parliament in which they had no elected representatives. Although the Stamp Act was repealed in 1766, the British government continued to assert its authority over the colonies. The Townshend Acts of 1767 imposed new taxes on goods such as paint, paper, and tea, further straining relations between Britain and its American territory. The immediate catalyst for the Boston Tea Party was the Tea Act of 1773. Contrary to popular belief, this act didn't impose a new tax on tea. Instead, it allowed the British East India Company to sell tea directly to the colonies, bypassing colonial merchants. While this actually reduced the price of tea in America, it was met with strong opposition for several reasons. 1. Colonists viewed it as another attempt by Parliament to exert control without colonial consent. 2. It threatened the livelihoods of colonial merchants involved in the tea trade. 3. Many feared that accepting this act would set a precedent for future taxes and regulation. As ships loaded with East India Company tea approached colonial ports, protests erupted across America. In many cities, the tea was either turned away or left to rot in warehouses. However, in Boston, the royal governor Thomas Hutchinson insisted that the tea would be unloaded and the required taxes paid. On December 16, 1773, a group of colonists decided to take dramatic action. Approximately 100 men, many belonging to the Sons of Liberty, disguised themselves as Mohawk Indians and made their way to Boston Harbor. They boarded 3 ships, the Dartmouth, the Eleanor, and the Beaver, and over the course of 3 hours, systematically destroyed every chest of tea on board. The protesters were careful in their destruction, focusing solely on the tea and leaving the ships and other property untouched. They even replaced a padlock they had broken during the raid. This focused approach underscored that their quarrel was with Parliament and the Tea Act, not with private property or the ship owners. News of the Boston Tea Party spread rapidly throughout the colonies and across the Atlantic to England. While many colonists applauded the action, others, including Benjamin Franklin, viewed it as an act of vandalism that demanded restitution. In London, the reaction was one of shock and anger. King George III and Parliament saw the destruction of the tea as an outright act of rebellion that required swift and decisive punishment. The British government responded with a series of punitive laws in 1774, known to the colonists as the Intolerable Acts, or Coercive Acts in Britain. These measures included 1. The Boston Port Act, which closed the port of Boston until the destroyed tea was paid for and order restored. 2. The Massachusetts Government Act, which restricted Massachusetts' self-government and gave the British governor more power. 3. The Administration of Justice Act, allowing British officials accused of crimes to be tried in Britain rather than in the colonies. 4. The Quartering Act, which required colonists to house and quarter British soldiers if necessary. Rather than subduing the colonies, these acts served to unite them in opposition to British rule. The First Continental Congress convened in Philadelphia in September 1774, bringing together delegates from 12 of the 13 colonies to coordinate a response to British actions. The Congress called for a boycott of British goods and sent a petition to King George III, conceding to Parliament's authority to regulate commerce, but disputing its ability to impose taxes on the colonies without colonial consent. They also made plans for a Second Continental Congress to meet the following year if their grievances were not addressed. As tensions continued to escalate, the first shots of the American Revolutionary War were fired at Lexington and Concord in April 1775. The Boston Tea Party, while not the first or last colonial protest, played a crucial role in the chain of events that ultimately led to American independence. The Boston Tea Party has become an enduring symbol of American resistance to tyranny and unjust rule. Its impact extends far beyond its immediate historical context. 1. Symbol of protest. It has inspired countless acts of civil disobedience and peaceful protest throughout American history and around the world. 2. American identity. The event has become a key part of the American origin story, embodying values of liberty, democracy, and resistance to unjust authority. Political symbolism. The phrase Tea Party has been invoked by various political movements, most notably the conservative Tea Party movement, that emerged in 2009. 4. Economic implications. The event highlighted the power of boycotts and economic pressure as tools of political protest. 5. Constitutional influence. The issues at the heart of the Tea Party, taxation, representation, and the limits of government authority, heavily influenced the drafting of the U.S. Constitution and Bill of Rights. The Boston Tea Party was far more than a simple act of vandalism or rebellion. It was a pivotal moment in the growing conflict between Great Britain and its American colonies, embodying the colonial grievances of taxation without representation and arbitrary rule from afar. The event and its aftermath served as a catalyst, intensifying colonial unity and resistance and setting the stage for the American Revolution. Today, the Boston Tea Party remains a powerful symbol of American values and the right to stand up against perceived injustice. It reminds us that the foundations of American democracy were forged not just through formal declarations and battles, but also through acts of civil disobedience and the courage of ordinary citizens willing to risk everything for their beliefs. As we reflect on this crucial event in American history, we're reminded of the ongoing responsibility each generation has to question authority, stand up for their rights, and actively participate in the democratic process. The spirit of the Boston Tea Party continues to inspire Americans and people around the world to fight for liberty, representation, and justice.